After my father died and my brother and sister and I were cleaning out his apartment, we were talking about what we were doing and what we wanted to do. And my sister said to me, I think you should be a marriage counselor because of the way you communicate. I was a terrible communicator. I believe the way that we get people to an accountability point is by connecting their personal goals to the goals of the company.
Diane Helbig is a business advisor and trainer, award-winning author, speaker, and host of the Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast. As president of Helbig Enterprises, she helps businesses and organizations operate more constructively and profitably. Diane is also the author of Succeed Without Selling, Lemonade Stand Selling, and Expert Insights, and serves on the NABO NEO board of directors.
Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial household?
I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family. My father was a salesman, and he was a really good one. He ended up having a business much later in life. He became a real estate broker. But when I was growing up, he was a salesman. My mom was a perpetual student. What I firmly believe is the reason why small business owners struggle is because of themselves.
Talk to me about your approach or what you were releasing from your value perspective to bring to help these businesses from saving themselves from certain problems.
I kept watching small business owners do two things that drove me crazy. One was being desperate for sales. And the other thing that I saw a lot of was small business owners not really knowing how to lead effectively.
What was the next iteration for you from a business perspective?
What really happened in my business was...
And the last question, in your own words, define what Built for This means to you.
What it means to me is...
Welcome back to another episode of Built for This, Stories of a Maverick. I'm your host, Jenna Bayuk. Excited to have you all listening today. We're going to have an amazing guest on this week's episode by the name of Diane Helbig. She's a powerhouse in business growth, strategic sales, and leadership development. As the Chief Improvement Catalyzer for the Helbig Enterprises, Diane has spent over 25 years working with businesses and nonprofits, crafting straightforward strategies for more productive, profitable, and more performance out of her clients. She's an award-winning keynote speaker, best-selling author of the books like Succeed Without Selling and Lemonade Stand Selling, and the host of Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast, named Corporate Speaker of the Year and recognized for multiple Stevie Awards for her thought leadership. Diane brings humor, candor, and clarity in every room she's in. Today, we're going to jump in and talk about curiosity-driven sales, accountable growth, to replace outdated hustle models, and how systems can unlock sustainable progress and what it takes to lead with both courage and compassion. So whether you're building, scaling, or reinventing, this is an episode you're definitely going to want to hear. Welcome, Diane. It's great to have you.
It is great to be here, Jenna. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, I always kind of love to start off where everyone begins, because I think sometimes we have interesting moments along the way where we could have gone a totally different path and or, ended up falling in love with something that we didn't ever see coming. So I'd love to kind of hear from you sort of what kind of got you into this world and where you're at today.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. It's a weird sort of, how did we end up here? I've always worked in small business, started out in leadership, moved into sales because I was told I had to go into sales by the company I was working for. And in 2005, my father passed away, and it was a turning point for me. It was just one of those, I need to do something different. And so I decided to take everything that I had learned, either through observation or experience or, going to classes, whatever it was, and put it into a business to help small business owners. Originally, it was just small business owners really overcome some of the challenges and roadblocks that they were experiencing that I felt like were sort of self-imposed, sort of doing it to themselves. So,
And I'm curious, you mentioned, your father passing away and that kind of being the catalyst for a big change. Did you grow up in an entrepreneurial household? Did you kind of see that around you, sort of take that big jump and be like, you know what, I'm going to just go do it for myself? Or was it something totally kind of new and not really kind of in your purview at that time?
that's a great question. I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family. I mean, if I think about it, my grandparents owned businesses. My parents did not. And so I don't know that I really paid attention to my grandparents, but my father was a salesman, and he was a really good one. and I got to watch him work, and I would work with him in his he and I were really close, and he just had a great mind for business, and so he ended up having a business much later in life. He became a real estate broker. So he
Okay.
had a business much later in life. But when I was growing up, he was a salesman. My mom was a perpetual student. So
Well, hearing that now, it makes me think of like, okay, curiosity and then like drive as well. So almost those like traits that you don't really know that are kind of getting instilled in you until you kind of make that risk to kind of go out on your own.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I always had that desire, but didn't know how it was gonna show up, and then all of a sudden, it did.
And I'm also curious, because you mentioned in your roles that you were kind of told to go into sales, and then obviously your dad being this really great salesperson. I have very similar. My dad grew up in the lumber industry, and then from a sales background, and and he worked his way up kind of to the top from that perspective. But I got to kind of see his style and very charismatic and like loved a good deal and the way he would kind of have jokes and like very engaging. I'm curious, was there kind of any moments where you heard something or the way he delivered something where you're like, aha, that's really good?
There was so he got vertigo when I was in high school, so he couldn't drive a car, but he still wanted to go meet with his clients. He sold furniture to furniture stores. So he was a manufacturer's rep. And so I drove him around, and I got to go in with, because he was wobbling. So I got to go into these meetings with him, and I watched him have these great relationships with these people where he wasn't selling them. He was just talking to them, and they so trusted him that when he would say, "This is a piece that will sell well in your store," they believed him because that's the relationship that he had built with them. That was a huge aha for me.
I love that. And so the moment happens where you lose that main kind of person, but all of a sudden it leads you to stepping out on your own. So you get the curiosity, you got the sales background, and then it doesn't surprise me that you kind of start off as focusing on small businesses, if that was kind of what was around you at the time. So kind of talk to me about your approach or what you were really seeing from your value perspective to bring to help these businesses from you know saving themselves from certain problems.
So I kept watching small business owners do 2 things that drove me crazy. One was, um, being desperate for sales, and
Mm.
you could feel it in the room. And it would break my heart 'cause I was actually in a sales appointment with someone. We were both with the same company, and she was leading it, and she wasn't listening. She did not hear the prospect say, "Okay." And so she kept, "Shut up. When they say okay, okay," right? She kept trying to convince him, and I just wanted to, like, grab her and I couldn't because she was my boss. But, and so I saw that, and the other thing that I saw a lot of was, um, small business owners not really knowing how to lead effectively. So, they would struggle keeping employees. They would struggle having their, employees be accountable and do the things that everyone knew they should do, and it was this weird mindset that they had that they wanted to be nice, I guess. I don't really know what it was, and it wasn't working for them, and then they would get angry, and the person they needed to be angry with was them. So those were the 2 things. I was like, "Man, if I can help people
Yeah.
not do these 2 things, they will be so much more successful and happy." And so, that was my driving force.
And in terms of, once you recognize those sort of issues, was there kind of right away a system or a process that you really kind of decided was your go-to way to work with these clients to help them either from an accountability perspective or maybe a strategic framework side or kind of any influential tools that you really started to kind of hone in on and kind of make them yours?
Yes and no. So, my whole practice has been completely organic because what I know about me is I have to get to know the person, and I'm really good. Like, I can walk into a room and I can tell you who's doing what and what's broken and what's whatever. It's just, I probably got it from my father. Because according to my uncle, that's exactly how my father was before I realized it. What I firmly believe is that the reason why small business owners struggle is because of themselves, because they're bringing something with them to the situation. So I really feel like my job is to really dig into that and figure that out, and then help them create processes that they will actually implement. Are there certain things you have to do? Sure. But how you're gonna do it has an awful lot to do with who you are and how you're wired and who other people are, and so, my process, right, my structure is to really get to know them and then help them create something, and it's different every time.
Yeah, no, I connect in that in terms of working with entrepreneurs myself. And I always say, the problems aren't necessarily super unique. But in terms of how we approach them and how we're going to create around them, it's got to be kind of based on what's going to work for that leader, because everybody has their skills and, their areas to grow in. And I'm curious, to come up from a place of, understanding that majority of the problems are going to be coming from that leader, whether it's a lack of self-awareness or understanding or skill set, depending on if they're really early on in their career or it's a learned habit over time. Usually that kind of comes from a lot of personal work and understanding how you're wired and built. So was there any kind of moments for you to really like reflect and work on yourself? And did you, what tools or books or coaches did you use to kind of help you?
So when I had to go into sales, and I said, because we argued for a year about me doing this, I took the Dale Carnegie course, sales training course, which was the best thing in the world. I highly recommend it. It was just life-changing, really, because it confirmed for me that the way that I wanted to engage with people was right, that it wasn't the salesy, sort of way. So that was really instrumental for me. Another thing, oddly, was that after my father died and my brother and sister and I were cleaning out his apartment, we were talking about what we were doing and what we wanted to do, and my sister said to me, she's my older sister, she said, "Well, I think you should be a marriage counselor because of the way you communicate."
Mm.
And I thought to myself, "Well, that's really funny coming from you," because and she and I are really close, because I was a terrible communicator.
Oh.
Terrible. Earlier, I was
Yeah.
sarcastic, I just bleh. But at some point, so I had to reflect. I had to do some real introspection and look at it and say, "You know what? I have learned how to communicate differently." Maybe it's having children, maybe it's getting married, I don't know what it is. But so that was another pivot for me.
I love that. I'm always curious because we have all the kind of moments where like, I just don't think the way I've been doing things is quite working for me right now. And I think I need to learn how to adjust that. Or this has happened and I'm bringing this into the room every time. And now I'm aware that I'm doing it. And then in terms of, accountability, and, having those tough conversations and sort of, shaping cultures, to align with that, sort of kinda talk to me about some of sort of those examples of kind of when you walked in, what it was like, and then how you worked with them to get them to, that better ideal state.
Oh my gosh. So let me say this, that I believe the way that we get people to an accountability point is by connecting their personal goals to the goals of the company. So if they can see that, and if they feel like they're contributing, they will make that shift. And then it's just a matter of keeping that going. So I've had a number of clients where they had no trust within the organization. And so first I had to work, you have to work with the leadership to say, okay, why do you think this is? Like, why do you think there isn't this trust? And we go through that conversation, and then what do you need from people? But then the kicker is, what do they need from you? Because as you said, with all of a sudden you realize this isn't working for me and I need to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, which can be a real tough conversation for people who are like, "I'm not the problem, it's them." Yeah.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, it's always the leader. And ultimately the responsibility is on us, but it's getting them to, for me, learn how to communicate in a way that pulls the other person toward them as opposed to pushing away. And so I'll give you an example. Like people will say, well, we have the meeting, we decide what we're going to do, we leave the meeting and they go off and they don't do that thing. It's like, okay, let's talk about that. What's happening? Are you following up with them? Well, no, they know what to do. Okay. How do you know they know what to do? They said yes. They said, uh-huh, when I asked them if they understood. It's like, okay.
Have you ever nodded your head and you're like, no, like, I don't know.
Right. They just want to get out of the room.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about what's going on here. So it's that. It's really, interestingly, it's breaking it down into the really small pieces so they can see at which points it's falling down. And then we just plug the point. What I say to people is it's not the people, it's the system. And it doesn't get to be the people until the system is completely, there are no gaps. Then it's the people.
For sure. And because you mentioned your sister saying you should be a marriage counselor, it makes me think of a therapy session. My favorite question is like, what did you just hear me say? And then have that person repeat back. And then you're either like, oh, I clearly didn't say what I actually meant, or like, perfect. Yes. Like, that's it. Go.
Yeah, and you can't leave the room until you're sure that you 2 have both been having the same conversation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, communication is one of those wild things. I don't know how many times I've sat with, entrepreneurs, where especially the serial founders, that their brains for sure squirrel and like a million things, where when you repeat back to them what they said, they're like, oh, like, no, that's not it at all. And you're just like, I laugh because I think it's so funny. And I'm like, so imagine like I have the skills because I've done this for a long time. That when people are coming to you with work and you're like, that's not what I asked for, go do it again. Aren't you listening? They're like, but that's literally what you said, like, I wrote it down, and it's like, "Well, that's not what I meant."
It's not what I meant, right? And the other thing they do is someone will come to them and go, "I have this situation, I don't know what to do." And they tell them what to do. And what I say to my clients is, "Stop telling them what to do. Ask them, what do you think you should do?" Because they know, they just don't want the responsibility, right?
Or
And
just
so
taking the time, I think, to really be like,
yeah.
where are you stuck? Have you really thought about this? Like, I'm here to help you, but I think you need to dig a little bit deeper and then come back with, like,
Right.
where you need support. And then people are like,
Yes.
"Oh," because like a little kid will always be like, help me," and they don't really need help, they just don't wanna do it.
Exactly. Exactly, but that's how you hold them account and that's how you get them to stop coming to you.
Yeah, I had one, particular person I worked for that initially when I started working with them, it was, like, such a point of frustration. I got given really big projects that I didn't necessarily understand how to do, and I would just sit there and I'm like, he's like, "You look stressed." I'm like, "I am stressed. I have no idea what to do with this." And he's like, "Okay, well, like, you can figure it out." And I would just sit there, I'm like, "Okay, well, can you help me?" He's like, "Yeah, sure. Once you've figured it out, like, come back with, like, 3 to 5 really great questions, or, like, go figure out how to, like, who you need to talk to, like, get some understanding." And I was like, but then as soon as I kinda got over that the first time, I'm like, "Oh, of course I can like, but now I have a mindset, I'm like, I can figure anything out whether I know how to do it or not.
It's so empowering, and that's what you wanna do. You reminded me that the first really good boss I had, I was in my 20s, and I was in a leadership position, and I would go to him and I would say, "Okay, Dave, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this." And one day he said to me, "Stop coming to me to tell me what you're doing. Just go do it. I trust you." Wow, right? Ch Mind blown. But then I knew when it was something that I did really need to go to him for, I could go and he would be there and he would, help me. It was life-changing for me. It gave me so much confidence that I really did know how to problem solve. Just like you learn that. It's a invaluable lesson.
And I think also you learn what happens when you mess up. And you're like, "Oh, I thought
Uh-huh.
that was the right way." And then you can go back and say, "I know exactly what I did wrong, but I couldn't afford to see that, and this is
Yeah.
why." And they're always like, "Okay, great. You know what to do. Like, continue on." And you're like, "Oh, okay." Like, again, like, accountable, like, "Yeah, you owned it, you saw it, it won't happen again, you
Yeah.
fixed it, like, carry on." And you're like, "Oh."
Yeah. That's how we learn.
But it's funny how we all kind of forget that, or we get so caught
Ooh.
up, in terms of stress and perceived outcomes and what could happen versus kind of just the basic human components of it, to kind of go from that. I love it. And then kind of as you started your journey in terms of working with small businesses, did you initially start to get a very clear understanding? Was it a specific industry you really honed in on, or a certain business size, or kind of how did it start to build momentum for you?
It was pretty much business size. I didn't really care what industry they were in because my belief was, and still is, business is business, sales is sales. I can learn your industry relatively quickly, right? I just, but I really wanted to work with very small micro enterprises because, or they didn't have to be really small, but the leadership hierarchy had to be really short in order to really affect change. Otherwise, if there was a lot of bureaucracy, I didn't want to have anything to do with it.
I love that. And then in terms of, working with people to kind of create workshops and training and, was that kind of coming as a opportunity you saw of sort of the work you were doing, and like, hey, I think I could probably, work with some different organizations or people to create workshop models versus kind of, we'll call it like individual coaching, or sort of what was the next iteration for you from a business perspective?
So I took a core coaching class at night while my kids were asleep to learn how to be an advisor and a coach and whatever. And they said there's different ways of marketing. Some are high touch, some are high tech, whatever. And there must have been an idea in there. And I literally launched my business, took 3 topics I was passionate about, created a little trifold brochure thing with 3 topics in there and just started giving it to people. And my banker met with me and he said, "So what's up?" I said, "I'm doing these." He goes, "Oh, I'm the education director for my chamber of commerce. Let me take this to them."
Yeah.
And he did. And it was like, "Okay, do this one," which then I had to create it because I hadn't. So workshops were always a thing.
Yeah.
I think what really happened in my business was I started doing, realizing that doing training in organizations that were bigger than small was an opportunity for me to be able to have affect change on a bigger scale. And I could do it because it was just training people and going, it wasn't the ongoing relationship with them. So that's the direction it's.
Yeah. And is there any terms, kind of like a specialty in terms of the workshops training that you're doing?
Yeah, I do sales, customer service, leadership, and conflict management.
Love some good conflict management. People generally are not awesome in that department. As my friends say to their kids, "Are we having some big feelings right now?" And I'm like, that's pretty much the 4-year-old version of adults in a room who have some kind of issue about something that's really insignificant.
But they think it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, gotta love it. We're all just big kids trying to figure it out. And I would
Exactly.
love to kind of, hear some feedback in terms of what you've gotten from like training and sort of, the approach you take from an audience perspective. Because workshops, we've all had them where you can kind of be like, asleep in your chair and you're like, why did I get dragged into this? Versus like hyper interactive. If you go to like a Tony Robbins level of a workshop, that type of energy. But sort of kind of what's your style, and then sort of what are the action plans that you leave with people after you've, completed those facilitations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I firmly believe that they have to do the work, set for a multitude of reasons. Right. So I create my trainings so that it follows a process. We start with challenges they're having with whatever the subject is, because I want to know. I can talk to anybody ahead of time, whoever decides we're doing the training, but I really want to know from the people what really are the things that are the issues. And then we do a lot of exercises, either in small groups or individually, or just group discussions where it's popcorn and they just, send it out. Um, and then we debrief whatever that activity is in terms of why did we do that activity, right? How did that connect to this topic? And a lot of it is around communication because communication ends up being the linchpin of just about everything. So we do it, we talk about it, they work together on some things, then we revisit that initial challenge to see if how they would view it differently now, what could they do differently? And they make a commitment, they make a decision about things that they are going to take away from whatever the training is, and they are going to implement. Sometimes I come back and we do a, how'd it go? What, just sort of smooth over those plans. As a matter of fact, I'm doing that next week with a group. Sometimes they're off and running and they just take the things that they learned. There's always something that stands out that they know they could plug in. And I ask them that at the end of the training. They have to tell me one thing that they picked up that they're taking. So
Great. And then, so how did it kind of dovetail from, workshops, client work, coaching into podcasts, writing a book? How did that all connect?
So I've been doing the podcast for 16 years. So what happened was, and actually all of those things are involved. So after I started my business, I just really wanted to get as much information in front of as many small business owners as I could. And I'm one person. So I needed to add things to my arsenal. So
Yeah.
that's where the podcast came in, because I
Yeah.
thought if I can interview experts in these different areas, people can take it and do whatever they want with it, but I can have a greater reach. So that's why I started the podcast, and that's what I do with it. And the same feeling with the books. I was writing a lot of articles, putting them out on the internet, and I thought, if I could just put it in a book, like my first book, if I could just put it in the book and I could get it in front of people, then they could do whatever with it. Then my most recent book, Succeed Without Selling, I was getting a little frustrated that people were doing things that weren't working for them, but they just kept doing them. And so I thought to myself, that's it. I'm putting all of it in a book with forms, with the whole shooting match, right? So that at least I feel like I have gotten it out there and done whatever I could with it, and then I took all of that and turned it into a training. So they all work together.
Well, I think that's a great way to kind of look at sort of what we'll call like a quote unquote very traditional model, but sort of switch it into something that's going to be a bit more beneficial for you, but also, you can give your clients, something to before they work with you, while they're working with you, after they're working with you, as to kind of keep that conversation going, or just to remind them, as we all usually have a post-it or a book where we look like, oh yeah, I remember I read that, like I'm letting that go. And so in terms of, as you look forward, in terms of, where you're at from a business perspective, AI coming in such a strong way, how are you looking at kind of the shape and the future of what you do?
So I realized late last year that I really want to be doing more um, speaking out on stages for a couple of one, because it's a bigger audience and hopefully I can affect change, but also because it's great marketing for me. And before COVID, that was one of two ways that I got clients. So I need to get back to it. Now that we're back in person, got to get back to it. So that's a pretty big focus for me right now. The great thing about AI is that for me is that it increases my bandwidth, because AI can do things that I was doing manually, so to speak. But it also gives me oftentimes a starting point. Like, I will never let AI write an article in my voice, ever. I don't let other people do it. Humans do it. I'm not going to let some thing do it. But there's so much that I can leverage with it. I use it for my podcast to automate a lot of the stuff that goes on with that, right? And that's just going to keep getting better and better. I also feel like I need to be venturing into other um, social spaces, right? Like, I'm on Instagram, but I need to be doing it differently. I need to be doing more of the video conversation kind of thing. So those are the things that I'm looking at, figuring out other ways of giving knowledge.
Yeah, no, I love that. And in terms of, fostering kind of integrity and curiosity, in these like early stage, we'll call them entrepreneurs, businesses, what is kind of your go-to or sort of ways about doing that when you work with them?
My favorite thing to do is to ask them why they got into business, or why they want to do whatever this thing is that they're about to do, or product or service they're going to offer, to bring them back to the actual reason why. Because most people will say, because I need revenue, because it'll make me money. That is not a reason. It is never a reason. And if that's your reason, then that's your focus, and you're never going to get what it is you're going for. So that's my, okay, hang on, what's in your head? Let's flip it around. And sometimes getting them to, that's hard. That's a mindset shift, right? That's tough. So then we gotta work on something tactical that they will go do, so then they can see it without having to think about it, right? Without having to just, okay, we're just gonna, and then it's like a drip method. It starts sinking in and they get it. And then if they can just keep doing the things that work, sooner or later, the light bulb goes off.
Yeah. And this person might be one and the same, or it might be two separate people. From a client perspective, who has been the most rewarding to work with and why? And who's been the most challenging to work with and why?
They might be the same person.
Yeah. Sometimes they tie in, sometimes they can be very different stories, but yeah.
Yeah. So I have a client, and I still have this client. We don't meet as often, but who was hanging on to everything, but could never take a vacation unplugged, and was way overloaded and wasn't getting to things that really needed to be gotten to by someone. Real frustrated. So challenging, because getting her to let go was very hard.
Yeah.
Rewarding, because once she did and she started seeing that it was working, first of all, she took a 5-day vacation totally unplugged, which was remarkable. And then she did maternity leave and shut her business down for 2 months
Wow.
with no negative impact. It was I was a little, concerned, but she's got,
I know it's like
I
you're like
know, right? I'm like, you can't do that. But she could. She's got a great client base. So
yeah.
it's so rewarding that she was just, and she even said to me one day, I had koozies made out of it. She said, oh, I just say to myself, if I can't get a hold of you, I just say to myself, well, what would Diane say? And then I go do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I
Once
love
I'm
it.
in your head, we're good. So,
Yeah, I had a person who worked for me for a long time, and I was so upset when she left. And it was a situation where I totally understood why she had to move on, but it was like really, really heartbreaking because I was like, "Oh, I want to work with you for longer. You have so much potential." And then years later, she reached out. She's like, "Just so you know, in every job I've gone to, your voice is always in the back of my head, pushing me, or like, oh no, Jenna would not be happy with me if I was the one to do this, or like I gotta go do the hard thing that like I want to run away from in the moment." I'm like, okay, I'll take that as a win, even though it took me a long time to get over the heartbreak of you leaving.
right? It's like you sit on their shoulder.
Yeah.
You're the good angel, right? That sits on their shoulder, and remember, this is how we
Yeah.
do it. It's great. Yeah.
Exactly. So kind of to close it out, if there's sort of maybe one mindset shift or any type of shift actually that you would want listeners to kind of carry forward or walk away with from, your experiences, what would that be?
Well, one mindset shift that everyone needs to make, if you haven't already, is from selling to listening. Just let it go. Selling doesn't work. Just let's all stop. But the other one is, you don't, uh, as a leader. So I'll do the other side of it. Your job is not to have all the answers. Your job is to convene the resources to figure out the answers. But there's no way you're ever going to be able to have all of them. So let that go too.
One of my favorite questions is, who do we need to pull in the room to figure this out?
Right.
Yeah. Where you're listening, you're not trying to come up with the answer. You're like, I don't know. Like, I don't have it all. Let's figure it out. Let's do this together. All right,
Yeah.
time for some rapid fire questions. What's your go-to
Okay.
question to spark curiosity in a sales conversation?
So what's going on?
So morning power hour or afternoon rest, kind of what keeps you sort of growth centered in your day?
Afternoon rest.
Mm. I get that. What's one myth about scaling that you wish more people would bust?
That everyone is supposed to scale. No.
Love it. What would be a book or resource beyond your own that kind of shaped how you lead or sell?
Well, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It is the utmost best. The Four Agreements is another one. There's a lot, but I'll go with those two.
Love it. And then last question, in your own words, define what built for this means to you.
What it means to me is that we all have within us the ability, the knowledge, the experience, and the curiosity to do whatever that thing is that we want to do. We are built for it.
Amazing. And so if anybody's listening that's very curious about, your work, training, workshops, any of like that, or as you mentioned, speaking opportunities, what's the best way to reach out and connect in with you?
Go to helbigenterprises.com. Everything is there. There's a link, somewhere on there. So that is it.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you taking time. It was so great to connect with you, learn more about you and how you approach working with clients and your background, and look forward to staying connected.
Me too. Thank you so much. This was fun.